So you can come in for tutorials just for that if you need to. So you'll notice that now instead of being given the symbols and the formulas, you're just given the words. So you have to write them. Our next step will be we'll learn different types of reactions, and then you eventually won't be given the products, you just will be given the reactants, and you have to pick the products. So kind of all different stages here. All right, so let's just go through a few of these and then we'll look at some on the practice. So we'll just look at number one. If it says iron, then that just means it's the element iron. It's just a piece of iron. So you just would put Fe. On sulfur, it's a little tricky because you have to remember that it is a polyatomic. We talked about sulfur when it's all by itself has to be 8 atoms. Phosphorus, when it's all by itself, has to be 4. So when I see this sulfur, I would have to write it as S with a subscript of 8. So those two elements combine to give me an ionic compound, iron sulfide. So you would have to write the formula for that. Remember, the Roman numeral tells you what the charge is. That tells me it's a +2. It doesn't tell me the subscript. And sulfide you would find on your ion sheet is a -2, so they cancel each other out. So the formula would just be FeS. So that's kind of like your rough draft. You get that done and then you balance it. So obviously what jumps out is that the sulfur has 8 atoms on one side and only 1 on the other. So I'm going to put an 8 in front of the compound. So that takes care of my sulfur. Now I have 8 iron atoms, so I have to come back and put an 8 right here. And then that would be my balanced equation. All right, anybody have any specific questions on that particular one? All right, we'll look at a couple more and then y'all can give one a try. So zinc, same thing as iron. Zinc is just a piece of zinc. And it's going to react with copper sulfate. So that's a compound. So I'm going to check my charges real quick. +2, -2. So once again, those are equal. So I just need to put them together. Copper and the SO4 is my sulfate. And then when I would combine those, the zinc and the copper will switch places and I'll end up with zinc sulfate as a compound now. +2, -2. So once again, equal already as far as canceling each other out. So I would just put them together for my zinc sulfate, and now copper will be floating around in there by itself. So that's my rough draft. That's my correctly written equation. Remember, once you write your equation, you can't change your subscript. So now if I look at this one, it's actually balanced already when I write it correctly. Because if you just kind of look, my zinc, I have 1 on each side. My copper, I have 1. And then if I keep my sulfate, this is my sulfate. So if I keep that together, it's just 1 unit. I have 1 of those on this side and 1 of those on that side. And that would be my balanced equation. If you're what you like to do is put a polyatomic ion in parentheses every time, that would be okay too. Either way would work. Since you didn't have a subscript added, you don't have to, but if you want to, that's fine. So if you get to an equation that you're having to write out and it's really hard to balance, go back and check and make sure you've written it correctly. Because sometimes if you don't write it correctly, it's impossible to balance because it's not written correctly to begin with. All right, why don't y'all give number 3 a try? Look at your green sheet and see if you can write your compounds out. if you checked the charges on these, everything was either a +1 or a -1 in every compound. Silver is a +1, bromide is a -1, +1, -1. So because of that, even when they rearrange and are combined different, I'm only going to need one of each. So in other words, silver nitrate plus sodium bromide yields silver bromide plus sodium nitrate. So when that's the case, then I'm going to be already balanced because I have one of everything. All right, why don't y'all give number 5 a try? It says ferric. That's the old way of naming things. So you'll want to use iron 3 chloride. This one you will have to do a little bit of work with it. All right, I'm just going to start writing out the equation. Now on this one, the hydroxide, the OH had to be in parentheses because it needs a subscript of 3. So that would be, before I balanced it, that would be correctly written. So if you're struggling with that part, that's what we had already previously learned. So you're going to need to maybe refresh your memory or do some work on it. Notice that subscripts do not transfer across the yield sign. So in other words, my chlorine had a 3 here because it was bound to that Fe plus 3. But over here, it does not need a subscript because ammonium is a +1, chloride's a -1. All right, so that would be correctly written. And now if I look at it, I can go through the process. FeCl NH4OH. NH4 is ammonium, OH is hydroxide. So I'm going to keep those together. All right. My iron to start off with, I have 1, 3, 1, and 1. And then on my product side, 1 iron, 1 chlorine, 1 ammonium, and 3 hydroxide. So that's how I'm going to get started. So my chlorine jumps out to me. I have 3 on my reactant side and only 1 on my product side. So I'm going to put a 3 in front of the compound that has chlorine. So that changes this to 3. And then it also changes my ammonium, my NH4 to 3. So that gives me something to fix over here. My NH4, I need 3. So I'm going to put them in front of my ammonium hydroxide. And that'll change that to 3. And it also changed that hydroxide group to 3, which was actually a good thing because I needed to have 3 of them. And that's how it works out a lot of time in the balancing. You'll fix something and then it kind of just gets everything else balanced. All right, if you will look at your practice, I'm going to do a couple on there. You'll kind of need to go to the back. I think about the back 3 sheets. 3 or 4, I'm sorry. And let me switch over to that. Maybe. There we go. I'm going to start. We're going to look at one of these because I want to show you one that has a couple of diatomics in it. So we're going to look at number 2 on here. Yeah, this is a practice. I think it is the 5th sheet, I believe, the front of the 5th sheet. The one that says word equations at the top. I'm going to do number 2. All right. It has a couple of diatomics in it. So my first thing, I need to write my formula. So aluminum is a +3 and bromide's a -1. So that would be AlBr3 plus chlorine gas. So when chlorine is all by itself like this, that's when it's a diatomic. So I would need to put it as Cl2. So that's why I make such a big deal about the diatomics. If you forgot that, then you're messed up like from the very beginning. Then aluminum chloride, once again, I would check my green sheet. See, the charges are not equal, so that means I'm going to have to give my chloride a subscript. And then bromine gas, bromine's a diatomic. Here it is all by itself, so it would have to have a 2. So once again, notice that the subscripts do not travel across the yield sign. Bromine had a 3 here because it's bound with aluminum, but it only has a 2 here because it's by itself. And the same thing with the chlorine. All right, so that would be my correctly written equation. And I have a lot of 3s and 2s, which is something you'll commonly see. So my bromine, how many do I need to get on each side to balance it? What's going to be a 6? 6 exactly. So that means I would need to put a 2 in front of here because 2 times 3 gives me 6. And a 3 in front of that one. So now I see that I have 2 aluminum, so I'm going to come and put a 2 in front of my aluminum chloride, which now gives me 2 times 3, 6. So come back and put a 3 here. So that alternating 2, 3, 2, 3, you'll, if you, as you do some practice, for some reason, it kind of tends to come up a lot. All right, and then if you will move to the next page, but if you'll go to the back where it says chemical word equations, and if you just read over number 1, you'll see it has a little bit more information. It says aqueous and all that. So we're going to look at one of those. So on the ones that we've been working on, it didn't really have things about the state. And like I said, we don't concentrate on that a whole lot in Chem 1. But if you have something like this one that gives you all the information, you would need to show that on your equation. So we'll just look at this one. It says aqueous sodium chloride. So there's my compound, sodium chloride, NaCl. And because it said aqueous, I would need to put that in parentheses behind the compound. And your state always goes behind the compound or behind the element, not on the top, not on the bottom. I've had them all over. And that reacts with aqueous lead nitrate. So I would write my formula for lead nitrate. Lead 2 nitrate, and then it says it is aqueous. But yes, ma'am. And then I come over here and I have lead 2 chloride. So that's PbCl2. And it tells me that's a precipitate. So what would I use to describe that as far as its state? What's that other word for precipitate? We said a precipitate forms like when I mix 2 clear liquids and I end up getting wet at the bottom. A solid. Thank you. You could put S. That's what I tend to do. You also, if you look back, you'll see that if I could also put an arrow going down because solid is in the product. And then aqueous sodium nitrate. So that is NaNO3. And then that one is AQ. All right, so I've gotten my equation written correctly, so then I need to balance it. And what jumps out to me is my chlorine. I have 1 here and I have 2 on my product side. So I'm going to put a 2 in front of my sodium chloride. So now I have 2 sodium, which means I'm going to need to account for that on my product side. So I'll put a 2 there. And when I put a 2 there on my product side, what did that also fix? The NO3, right? Because I already had 2 over here by putting a 2 there. So then everything is balanced and I've got a good equation written out. All righty. Any questions on that? Quiz? Yes, quiz over this on Wednesday. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. This right here, that Roman numeral. That what This, no. This just goes to those 2. Is that what you mean? Yeah. It just applies to what's in the parentheses in front of it. All right. So maybe give one a try before you put up. I think we got a few minutes. And like I said, we won't quiz on the actual writing of them till Wednesday.